The cargo bay of the merchant vessel Stellar Wanderer reeked of unwashed bodies and desperation. Kira-chan pressed herself against the cold metal wall, watching the other human refugees huddle together in their assigned corner. At 15, she was old enough to understand why the Galactic Council had labeled their species unfit for integration, but young enough to still burn with righteous anger about it. 3 months had passed since the Zephyrian Empire declared humanity a failed experiment in sentience. The official decree stated that humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, and too dangerous to exist alongside civilized species. What followed was systematic deportation from every human colony in Council space. Kira's parents had died during the evacuation of New Terra, caught in the crossfire when desperate colonists tried to resist the Zephyrian peacekeepers. Now she was alone, one of thousands of human orphans scattered across refugee ships, being transported to the galactic rim where they could cause no further disruption to interstellar harmony. The irony wasn't lost on her that the so-called peaceful species had killed more humans during the deportation than humanity had ever harmed in 2 centuries of space exploration. Captain Thexvar, a tall insectoid Manthari, made his daily inspection of the cargo bay. His compound eyes swept over the humans with obvious disgust. 27 days until we reach the rim colonies, he announced in his clicking, mechanical translation. Try not to die before then. Dead cargo doesn't pay well. Kira watched him leave, her small hands clenched into fists. She had learned to hide her anger, to appear harmless and broken like the adults expected. But inside, her mind worked constantly, cataloging every detail of the ship's operations, every routine of the crew, every weakness in their security. The other refugees had given up hope, but Kira refused to accept that humanity's story would end with exile and slow extinction. She had read the restricted council archives before the evacuation, accessing files her cybernetics engineer mother had left unsecured. What she discovered there changed everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. Dragons were real. Not the mythical creatures from human folklore, but an ancient species that predated the Galactic Council by millions of years. The dragons had withdrawn from galactic politics long ago, retreating to hidden worlds in uncharted space. According to the classified files, they possessed technology that made council fleets look like children's toys. More importantly, they had never submitted to council authority. The archives contained fragments of an old treaty, something called the Compact of Flames, which supposedly granted protection to any species that could prove their worth to the dragons. The details were heavily redacted, but Kira had found references to trials, tests of courage, and wisdom that determined whether a species deserved dragon patronage. It was a desperate plan, probably impossible, but it was better than accepting slow death on a rim world. Kira began her preparations carefully, using her mother's old tools to hack into the ship's navigation system during sleep cycles. She needed to find dragon space, and she needed to get there before the Stellar Wanderer reached its destination. The ship's computer contained star charts that went far beyond Council territory. Deep in the classified naval databases, Kira found what she was looking for: coordinates for a system marked only as restricted ancient claim. The notation was an old galactic, a ceremonial language used only for the most serious treaties and declarations. Over several weeks, Kira carefully modified the ship's course, making tiny adjustments during routine maneuvers that wouldn't trigger automatic alerts. She calculated that they would pass within a few light years of the restricted system in 18 days. Close enough for her to reach it in an escape pod, if she could find a way to access one without being caught. The opportunity came during a routine supply transfer with a council patrol vessel. While Captain Thexvar was distracted by negotiations with the patrol commander, Kira slipped out of the cargo bay and made her way to the pod bay. Her mother had taught her enough about ship systems to override the basic locks, and her small size allowed her to move through maintenance shafts undetected. She programmed the pod's navigation system with the dragon coordinates and sealed herself inside just as the supply transfer completed. The pod would launch automatically during the next scheduled maintenance cycle, disguised as a routine systems check. By the time anyone noticed she was missing, she would be long gone into the void. As the hours passed, Kira allowed herself to think about what might happen if she was wrong. The dragon worlds might be empty, their inhabitants long extinct, or they might kill her immediately for trespassing in their territory. But even death was better than watching humanity fade away in exile while the Council congratulated itself on maintaining galactic peace. The pod base suddenly filled with light as the maintenance cycle began. Kira felt the familiar sensation of the ship's artificial gravity shifting as systems came online. Any moment now, the automated sequence would launch her pod as part of the routine diagnostics. Through the small porthole, she could see the swirling colors of hyperspace. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of Council authority, ancient powers still existed. Powers that might be willing to help humanity if she could prove they deserved it. The launch sequence initiated with a soft chime. Kira gripped the pod's controls as she was ejected into the cosmic darkness between stars. Behind her, the stellar wanderer continued its journey toward the rim, carrying its cargo of broken dreams and defeated people. Ahead lay the unknown, and the slim chance that a 15-year-old human girl could change the fate of her entire species. The pod's engines fired, accelerating toward the restricted coordinates at maximum speed. Kira had enough supplies for 10 days if she rationed carefully. Either she would find the dragons and convince them to help humanity, or she would die trying. Both options seemed better than the alternative. As her pod raced through the void, Kira began composing what she would say to the dragons if she found them. She would tell them about human courage, about the explorers who had pushed into unknown space without weapons or conquest in mind. She would speak of human creativity, their ability to solve problems that confounded other species. Most importantly, she would explain that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers, but their refusal to abandon hope even in the darkest circumstances. Hours passed in the lonely darkness between stars. The pod's sensors began detecting unusual energy signatures ahead, patterns that didn't match any known Council technology. Kira's heart raced as she realized she might actually have found something real. The coordinates weren't empty space after all. A massive structure appeared on her sensors, something that dwarfed even the largest Council starships. It was clearly artificial, but followed no design principles she recognized. The hull seemed to shimmer and shift as if it existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This was definitely not Council technology. As her pod approached, Kira detected multiple scanning beams sweeping over her small craft. Whatever inhabited this place was clearly aware of her presence. She opened a communication channel, not knowing if anyone would respond or if they would simply destroy her for trespassing. "This is Kira, Chan of Earth," she broadcast on all frequencies. "I come seeking an audience with the Dragon Lords. Humanity faces extinction, and I request the right to speak for my people under the ancient compact of flames." For long moments, there was only silence. Then, her pod systems were overwhelmed by an external signal, something far more sophisticated than anything the Council possessed. The pod's engines shut down, and she felt herself being drawn toward the massive structure by some invisible force. A voice spoke directly into her mind, bypassing her communication system entirely. It was ancient and powerful, carrying the weight of millennia. "Small human child, you speak of compacts forgotten by the younger races. What makes you believe your species deserves our attention?" Kira's hands shook as she replied, speaking aloud to the empty pod while knowing her thoughts were being monitored. "Because we never surrender. Because even when faced with impossible odds, humans find a way to survive and protect those they care about. Because a 15-year-old girl would steal a pod and cross the galaxy alone if it meant saving her people." The ancient laughter that filled her mind wasn't mocking, but genuinely amused. "Indeed, young one. Your actions speak louder than your words. Very well. You shall have your audience. though I warn you that the trials ahead will test more than your courage. The dragons do not grant their protection lightly. Kira's pod was guided into a docking bay that defied comprehension. The walls seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, and gravity worked in impossible directions. As she stepped out of her pod, she found herself face to face with something that made her mother's old stories about earth dragons seem quaint by comparison. The being before her was easily 30 feet long, with scales that reflected colors that didn't exist in normal space. Its eyes held the wisdom of ages, and when it spoke, reality seemed to bend around its words. This was what true power looked like, the force that had shaped the galaxy before the Council even existed. Welcome to the Heart of Flame, young human. I am Pyraxis the Eternal, and you have requested something that has not been granted to any species for over 1,000,000 years. Tell me, child of the Forsaken race, why should the dragons risk themselves for humanity? Kira stood as straight as she could, meeting the ancient dragon's gaze without flinching. Everything depended on what happened next, not just for her, but for every human scattered across the galaxy. She had crossed impossible distances and overcome incredible odds just to reach this moment. Now, she had to convince the most powerful beings in the galaxy that humanity deserved to survive. The trial of her life was about to begin. Pyraxis the Eternal studied Kira with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. The dragon's massive form coiled in the impossible architecture of the Heart of Flame, scales shifting through colors that had no names in any known language. When he spoke, his voice resonated through dimensions beyond the physical. The compact of flames, he said slowly, was created in the early days of this galaxy, when species still possessed honor and wisdom. It has been invoked only 7 times in 4,000,000 years. Of those 7 species, only 3 survived the trials required to earn our protection. Kira felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders like a mountain. What happened to the others? They discovered that courage alone is insufficient. The dragons do not simply grant protection to any species that asks. We must be convinced that those we shelter will use our gift wisely, that they will not become another plague upon the galaxy, like so many before them. The dragon lord gestured with one massive claw, and the crystalline walls around them began displaying images. Kira saw the rise and fall of countless civilizations, species that had grown powerful only to destroy themselves or others. She watched worlds burn and entire stellar regions become lifeless wastelands. The Galactic Council believes itself enlightened. Pyraxis continued, but it is merely the latest in a long line of organizations that seek to impose order through force. They see humanity as a threat because you refuse to accept their definition of civilization. In this, they're not entirely wrong. We're not perfect, Kira said quietly, but we're not monsters either. Humans have done terrible things, but we've also done beautiful ones. We explore not to conquer, but to learn. We help other species even when it costs us. Words, young one. The galaxy is full of species that speak beautifully of their virtues, while their actions reveal darker truths. The trials exist because actions matter more than intentions. Pyraxis raised his great head, and the chamber around them shifted. The crystalline walls became transparent, revealing a vast space filled with swirling energies and floating platforms. Other dragons moved through this space, some in physical form, others as pure energy or mathematical concepts given consciousness. The first trial is the trial of truth, Pyraxis explained. You must experience the complete history of your species, both the triumphs and the failures, and accept responsibility for all of it. Many who enter this trial are broken by the weight of their species' sins. Others emerge unable to see past their people's glories. Balance is required. A shimmering portal opened before them. Beyond it, Kira could see swirling visions of Earth's history, from humanity's earliest days to the present crisis. She felt the pull of ancient magic drawing her forward, but Pyraxis placed a massive claw in her path. Before you begin, understand this. If you fail any of the 3 trials, you will die. But your death will be meaningful, for it will serve as a lesson to future petitioners. The dragons remember every failure as clearly as every success. Kira nodded, surprised by how calm she felt. What are the other trials? The trial of sacrifice, where you must choose between your own survival and the greater good. And the trial of wisdom, where you must solve a problem that has puzzled the greatest minds in the galaxy for eons. Pyraxis's expression softened slightly. You are very young to attempt this, small human. Even adult representatives of most species struggle with these challenges. Maybe that's why I have a chance, Kira replied. Adults overthink things. Sometimes the simple answer is the right one. The ancient dragon's laughter rumbled like distant thunder. Indeed, your species' gift for unexpected solutions is part of what makes you interesting. Very well, young truth seeker. Enter the trial of truth, and may your species' courage serve you well. Kira stepped through the portal and immediately found herself standing on the African plains 3 million years ago, watching humanity's earliest ancestors discover fire. She experienced their fear and wonder, felt their determination to survive in a hostile world. The visions moved forward through time, and Kira lived through every major moment in human history. She felt the joy of the first farmers, the terror and excitement of early explorers crossing unknown oceans. She experienced the brilliance of scientists unlocking the secrets of the universe, and the horror of warriors turning those discoveries into weapons. The weight of human achievement and human failure pressed down on her equally. She lived through the first contact with alien life, felt the wonder as humans realized they weren't alone in the universe. She experienced the early years of expansion, when human explorers pushed into unknown space with nothing but curiosity and hope driving them forward. These were the moments that made her proud to be human. But the trial didn't let her dwell on the positive. She experienced humanity's mistakes as well. The corporate wars that devastated several systems. The near extinction of the gentle folk of Kepler, 442b, when human industrial accidents poisoned their atmosphere. The religious conflicts that turned 3 colonies into wastelands. Each failure hit her like a physical blow. She felt the pain of every species that had suffered because of human actions. The weight of accumulated guilt threatened to crush her spirit, but something kept her standing. Between the failures, she saw something else. Humans trying to make things right. She watched human relief workers risking their lives to evacuate the gentle folk. She saw human scientists spending decades developing technology to restore poison worlds. She witnessed human peacemakers ending conflicts that had raged for generations, not through force, but through understanding and compromise. The pattern became clear. Humans made terrible mistakes, but they also worked harder than any other species to fix those mistakes. They didn't just accept failure and move on. They learned from it and dedicated themselves to ensuring it never happened again. The visions reached the present day, showing her the deportation and the Galactic Council's decision to exile humanity. She felt the pain and desperation of her people, but she also saw something the Council had missed. In refugee camps across the galaxy, humans were already organizing, planning, refusing to give up. They were adapting to circumstances that would have broken other species. When the portal finally released her, Kira found herself back in the crystalline chamber, tears streaming down her face. Pyraxis watched her with ancient eyes that seemed to see into her soul. "You have seen the truth of your species," the Dragon Lord said. "Both the darkness and the light. How do you judge humanity now?" "We're not perfect," Kira said, her voice steady despite her tears. "We've done terrible things, and we'll probably make more mistakes in the future. But we never stop trying to be better. Every failure teaches us something. Every mistake makes us more determined to protect others from the same harm. And Do you believe your species deserves survival despite these failures? Kira thought of all the humans scattered across refugee ships, all the children who would never see their homeworlds again. She thought of her parents who had died trying to protect strangers during the evacuation. She thought of human scientists working without payment to solve problems on alien worlds, human artists sharing their creativity freely, human explorers mapping dangerous regions so others could travel safely. Yes, she said firmly. We deserve to survive because we make the galaxy better. Not perfect, but better. We're the species that sees a problem and says, how can we fix this? Instead of how can we avoid this? We're the ones who jump into danger to help people we've never met. Pyraxis nodded slowly. The trial of truth is complete, and you have passed. Your assessment shows wisdom beyond your years. You see your species clearly, neither excusing their failures nor dismissing their virtues. This is more than most manage. The chamber shifted again, revealing a different space. This one was stark and simple, containing only 2 platforms suspended over an endless void. On one platform stood a young human boy, maybe 10 years old, clearly terrified. On the other was a complex control system. The trial of sacrifice, Pyraxis explained. The child you see is the last survivor of the research station at Proxima Centauri, destroyed when the Council decided the human scientific facilities were potential military threats. He has been in suspended animation for 2 months, kept alive by failing life support systems. Kira's blood turned to ice. What do I have to do? You can save him, but only by using your own life force to power his escape pod. The energy required will kill you instantly. Or you can save yourself and let him die, preserving your life to continue advocating for your species. Pyraxis's voice was emotionless, but Kira sensed this trial was crucial. Choose quickly. His life support will fail in 60 seconds. Kira looked at the boy, seeing her own fear and determination reflected in his eyes. She thought about her mission, about all the humans counting on her to somehow save them. If she died here, who would speak for humanity? Who would complete the trials and win dragon protection? But as she looked at the child, she realized there was no choice at all. This was what made humans different from the Council species. When faced with the choice between personal survival and protecting the innocent, humans chose protection. It was what her parents had done. It was what she would do. How do I transfer the power? She asked, moving toward the control system. You simply place your hands on the transfer nodes and activate the sequence. The process is irreversible. Kira reached for the controls without hesitation. She had crossed the galaxy to save humanity, but if saving humanity meant letting children die, then she had failed already. Some things were more important than species survival. Wait, Pyraxis's voice stopped her just before she touched the controls. Look again at the child. Kira looked more closely and realized the boy wasn't real. He was a hologram, detailed enough to fool casual observation, but clearly artificial when examined carefully. She felt a mixture of relief and confusion. The trial of sacrifice tests whether you would choose others over yourself when the stakes are highest, Pyraxis explained. Most species fail because their representatives try to find clever ways around the choice. They negotiate, they seek third options, they refuse to accept the terms of the trial. You were prepared to die without hesitation to save a child you had never met. Of course I was, Kira said, still shaking from the adrenaline. He was just a kid. Kids don't deserve to die because adults can't figure out how to get along. And this is why your species intrigues us. The Galactic Council calls humanity aggressive and unpredictable, but they miss the crucial point. Human aggression is almost always protective. You fight to defend others, not to conquer them. The trial space disappeared, replaced by the original crystalline chamber. But now Kira could see other dragons watching from the shadows, their ancient eyes fixed on her with interest. Word of her trials was spreading through their community. One trial remains, Pyraxis said. The trial of wisdom. This is where most petitioners fail, not because they lack intelligence, but because they cannot see beyond their own species' perspective. A new space opened around them, this one filled with floating mathematical equations and holographic displays. At the center was a problem that had clearly stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy. A star system where 3 intelligent species shared 3 worlds, each claiming exclusive ownership of all 3 planets and their resources. The Triloky crisis, Pyraxis explained. 3 species, each convinced that the others are invaders in their ancestral system. The Galactic Council has tried mediation, resource-sharing agreements, territorial divisions, even forced relocations. Nothing works. Each species has legitimate historical claims, and their conflicts have already led to 2 wars. A 3rd war will likely result in the extinction of all 3 species. Kira studied the displays, taking in the complex history and conflicting claims. The Vindari had evolved on the first planet, but needed resources from the second to survive. The Ashanti had originated on the second planet, but required the third planet's unique crystals for their technology. The Morkai had developed spaceflight first and established colonies on all 3 worlds before the others achieved interstellar travel. Each species could prove they had been in the system first, depending on how you defined first. Each had valid needs that required access to resources the others controlled. Traditional solutions had failed because they all started from the assumption that one species had to win while the others lost. What if they're asking the wrong question? Kira said slowly. Everyone's trying to figure out who owns what, but maybe ownership isn't the point. She manipulated the holographic displays, pulling up data about each species' capabilities and needs. The answer began to form in her mind, simple and obvious once she stopped thinking about territorial claims and started thinking about cooperation. Look, she said, highlighting key data points. The Vindari are master biotechnicians. The Ashanti create the most advanced crystalline computers in the galaxy. The Morkai are incredible engineers and builders. They're not competing for the same resources. They're 3 parts of a perfect whole. Pyraxis leaned forward, interested. Explain. What if they stopped trying to own the system and started trying to optimize it? The Vindari could use their biotech to terraform all 3 worlds, making them more productive and livable. The Ashanti could create computational systems that manage resources perfectly, eliminating waste and ensuring everyone gets what they need. The Morkai could build the infrastructure to connect everything efficiently. She manipulated the displays again, showing how the 3 species' technologies could complement each other. They don't need to divide the system. They need to share it. Not just the resources, but the responsibility. Make all 3 species citizens of all 3 worlds. Let them specialize in what they do best and share the benefits. The Council tried resource sharing, Pyraxis noted. It failed because each species wanted to maintain control. Because they were still thinking about ownership. I'm talking about partnership. Real partnership, where all 3 species have equal say in decisions and equal access to benefits. Where a Vindari born on the first planet has the same rights as an Ashanti born on the second planet or a Morkai born on the third. Kira could see the solution clearly now. Create a new type of government, one that represents the system itself rather than individual species. Elect leaders based on competence and vision, not what planet they came from. Judge success by how well all 3 species thrive, not by how much each one controls. And if they refuse, if their prejudices run too deep for such cooperation, then start with the children. Create exchange programs, joint schools, mixed communities. Let the next generation grow up thinking of themselves as Triloky first and Vindari or Ashanti or Morkai second. The adults might be too set in their ways, but kids adapt. Pyraxis was silent for a long moment, processing her proposal. Around them, other dragons emerged from the shadows, their attention fully focused on the small human girl who had just solved a problem that had stumped the galaxy's best minds. Your solution requires trust, one of the other dragons observed. These species have been at war for generations. Trust will not come easily. That's why you start small, Kira replied. Find individuals from each species who are willing to try, even if their governments aren't ready. Create a pilot program on a space station or asteroid. Prove the concept works on a small scale before asking entire planets to commit. And if the pilot program fails, Kira schockt. Then you try something else. Humans are good at failing forward. Every failure teaches you something about what doesn't work, which gets you closer to what does work. The trial of wisdom was complete. Around her, the assembled dragons spoke in voices that touched the edge of reality itself, debating her solutions in languages older than most stars. Finally, Pyraxis turned back to her. You have passed all 3 trials, young human. Your solutions show wisdom, your choices show character, and your knowledge shows understanding. The dragons have not granted protection under the Compact of Flames for over 50,000 years, but we are prepared to make an exception. Kira felt her knees go weak with relief, but Pyraxis wasn't finished. However, our protection comes with conditions. Humanity must prove worthy of our trust. You will be our first human ambassador, responsible for ensuring your species uses our gift wisely. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Looking around at the ancient dragons, beings of such power that they could reshape reality with a thought, Kira realized that her real journey was just beginning. 3 weeks after passing the trials, Kira stood on the bridge of the dragon vessel Eternal Flame, watching as they approached the edge of Council space. The ship defied every law of physics she understood, moving through dimensions that existed between the normal universe and somewhere else entirely. When they emerged into real space, they would appear directly above the Galactic Council's primary fleet base. Pyraxis had spent those 3 weeks teaching her about dragon technology and the true history of the galaxy. What she learned changed her understanding of everything. The Galactic Council wasn't the first attempt at universal peace, it was the 14th. Each previous attempt had collapsed when member species grew too comfortable with central authority and forgot how to think for themselves. The dragons withdrew from galactic politics, Pyraxis had explained, because we realized that imposed peace is not true peace. Real harmony must come from understanding and choice, not from fear of punishment. Now, they were about to put that philosophy to the test. The dragon fleet accompanying them was small by dragon standards, only 12 vessels, but each ship contained technology that could devastate entire star systems. More importantly, they carried something the Council had never seen, proof that there were powers in the galaxy that operated outside their authority. The plan was elegantly simple. The dragons would appear above the Council fleet, demonstrate their overwhelming technological superiority, and then offer to negotiate humanity's return to galactic society, not as refugees or exiles, but as equals under dragon protection. Translation field activating, announced Valith, the dragon ship's navigator. Like all her people, she could exist in multiple forms simultaneously. Today she appeared as a crystalline humanoid, her true draconic form flickering in and out of visibility around the edges. The Eternal Flame dropped out of dimensional transit directly above the Council's most powerful dreadnought. Alarms immediately began blaring across the fleet as sensors registered the impossible energy signatures of the dragon vessels. Kira could imagine the panic on the Council ships as they realized they were facing technology beyond their comprehension. Admiral Zextull, the Manthari fleet commander, opened a communication channel within minutes. His insectoid face filled the view screen, compound eyes wide with shock. Unknown vessels, you are in violation of Galactic Council territorial space. Identify yourselves immediately or face the consequences. Pyraxis materialized on the bridge in his full dragon form, 30 feet of scales and ancient power. When he spoke, his voice carried across space without need for technological amplification. I am Pyraxis the Eternal, first speaker of the Dragon Conclave. We come to discuss the matter of humanity. The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute. Kira could see Admiral Zextull consulting with other officers, his movements quick and agitated. When he finally responded, his voice carried careful respect that hadn't been there before. Lord Pyraxis, the Galactic Council was not aware that the dragons had returned to active galactic politics. We welcome dialogue, but humanity has been classified as incompatible with civilized society. Classifications can change, Pyraxis replied mildly. We propose a demonstration. We will present humanity's case through their chosen representative, and you will present your case against them. Let the evidence speak for itself. Kira felt her stomach clench. She had passed the dragon trials, but this was different. Now, she had to convince not just one ancient being, but the entire leadership of galactic civilization. Representatives from over 200 species would judge whether humanity deserved to exist. The council agreed to the meeting, probably because they were terrified of what would happen if they refused. Within hours, the greatest political minds in the galaxy were gathering on the neutral space station Concordia. Kira had 48 hours to prepare humanity's defense. She spent those hours not practicing speeches or reviewing legal precedents, but doing something much simpler, recording messages from humans scattered across the galaxy. Using dragon communication technology, she reached refugee ships, hidden colonies, and scattered families throughout council space. When the hearing began, the council chamber was filled with species Kira had only read about. The towering Kreks with their crystal bodies. The gaseous ethereals who existed in specially designed containment suits. The collective consciousness of the hive minds speaking through their biomechanical avatars. Chancellor Vortha K, a massive turtle-like being from the ancient wisdom worlds, called the session to order. This tribunal has been convened to review the classification of the species known as humanity. The dragons have requested that this classification be reconsidered. Let us hear first from those who support the current exile order. Admiral Zextull stepped forward, his presentation crisp and efficient. He displayed holographic evidence of human conflicts, the corporate wars, the Kepler 442b incident, various border disputes, and resource conflicts. The evidence was damning, showing humanity as aggressive, unpredictable, and dangerous to galactic stability. Humans, he concluded, represent everything that threatens peaceful coexistence. They are territorial, violent, and incapable of accepting authority. They question established order and encourage dissent among other species. For the safety of the galaxy, they must remain in exile. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. Several species nodded their approval of the Admiral's presentation. Kira realized that fear of humanity ran deeper than she had understood. To many council species, humans represented chaos in a carefully ordered universe. Chancellor Vortha K turned to her. Human representative, you may now present your species' defense. Kira stood, looking impossibly small in the vast chamber. She had prepared no grand speeches, no legal arguments, no appeals to precedent. Instead, she activated the recordings she had collected. The chamber filled with human voices. Dr. Sarah Kim, working without pay to develop vaccines for a plague affecting the gentlefolk. Captain Michael Rodriguez, whose freighter crew had died rescuing Krex miners from a collapsing asteroid facility. Teacher Emily Watson, who had spent 10 years creating educational programs that helped species with different learning styles communicate better. One by one, the voices told their stories. Humans who had risked everything to help strangers. Scientists who shared their discoveries freely instead of selling them for profit. Artists whose work had brought beauty to worlds across the galaxy. Children who had grown up considering aliens their best friends and playmates. You say we're aggressive, Kira said when the recordings finished. You're right. We're aggressive about helping people. We're aggressive about solving problems. We're aggressive about protecting those who can't protect themselves. She gestured to the recordings, still echoing in the chamber's memory systems. Yes, we've made mistakes. Yes, we've caused harm. But look at what we do when we realize we've caused harm. We don't just apologize and move on. We dedicate our lives to fixing what we broke. She moved to the center of the chamber, addressing different species directly. The ethereals nearly went extinct from a genetic plague 200 years ago. Who developed the cure? Human scientists, working for free because they couldn't stand to watch an entire species die. The hive minds faced a communication breakdown that threatened to fracture their collective consciousness. Who solved it? A human linguist who spent 30 years learning to think in collective terms. Chancellor Vorth, A.K., leaned forward. These examples are compelling, but they do not address the central concern. Humans consistently challenge authority and destabilize established order. Because sometimes the established order is wrong, Kira replied firmly. The Kreks used to enslave other crystal-based species until humans convinced them that sentience wasn't determined by body composition. The Ashanti kept their technological advances secret until humans showed them the benefits of open research. The ethereals lived in isolation until humans proved that gaseous and solid species could coexist. She could see some of the assembled representatives shifting uncomfortably. Several species had indeed benefited from human interference in their traditional ways. You call us unpredictable, she continued, but that's only because we see solutions you don't consider. You call us territorial, but we're the only species that regularly adopts orphans from other species as our own. You call us violent, but our violence is almost always defensive. Admiral Zextull stepped forward again. Yet humans consistently refuse to accept council authority. They ignore regulations, violate treaties, and encourage others to do the same. Because some regulations are stupid, Kira said bluntly, earning gasps from several representatives. The council banned human exploration of the Vega Nebula because it was too dangerous. If humans had obeyed that regulation, the Twilight Builders would still be trapped in their collapsing stellar nursery instead of thriving in their new home. She activated another set of recordings, these showing the rescue operation that had saved an entire species from extinction when their star went unstable. The council had declared the region off limits, but human volunteers had ignored the ban and evacuated over 3 billion Twilight Builder eggs to safety. We don't ignore authority because we're rebellious, Kira explained. We ignore authority when it prevents us from doing what's right. And we accept the consequences of our actions because we believe some things are more important than following rules. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered her words. Finally, Chancellor Vorth spoke again. Your arguments have merit, young human, but this tribunal must consider the stability of the entire galaxy. If we allow one species to ignore our authority, others will follow. Good, Kira said simply. Maybe they should. The shocked silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. Ambassador Thexera of the Ethereals, speaking through her containment suit's translation system. The human makes a valid point. Perhaps our authority should be questioned more often. Other voices began joining the conversation. Species that had been silent during the formal presentations started sharing their own experiences with humans. Stories of cooperation, innovation, and mutual aid that had never made it into official council records. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Species after species stepped forward to share how humans had helped them, challenged them, or inspired them to be better than they had been before. But other species spoke of their fears, their concerns about human unpredictability disrupting the careful balance that had maintained galactic peace. As the discussion continued, Kira realized something important was happening. For the first time in decades, the Galactic Council was actually debating rather than simply enforcing predetermined policies. The human question was forcing them to examine their own assumptions about peace, order, and civilization. Finally, Chancellor Vorth called for order. This tribunal has heard extensive testimony both for and against the human species. However, there remains one crucial question. Can humanity be trusted to operate within galactic society without destabilizing it? Pyraxis, rose from where he had been silently observing. If I may offer a suggestion, Chancellor, the dragons propose a different approach to this question. We welcome your input, Lord Pyraxis. Rather than debating whether humans can be trusted in theory, why not test them in practice? Grant them provisional readmission to galactic society. Allow them to participate in council affairs, but under observation. Judge them by their actions over the next standard year. Several representatives immediately objected, but Pyraxis continued. To ensure accountability, the dragons will guarantee human behavior. If humanity proves unworthy of trust, we will personally ensure they return to exile. The weight of that promise silenced all objections. Everyone in the chamber knew that dragon guarantees were absolute. If the dragons vouched for humanity, they would ensure humanity lived up to that trust or face consequences beyond imagination. Chancellor Vorthake consulted with his advisors for several minutes. When he returned to the podium, his expression was thoughtful. Lord Pyraxis, such a guarantee is unprecedented. Are you certain the dragons are willing to take such responsibility? We are, Pyraxis replied. Humanity has earned our respect through the trials. Now, let them earn the galaxy's respect through their actions. The vote that followed was closer than Kira had dared hope. 127 species in favor of provisional readmission, 98 opposed, and 23 abstaining. It wasn't an overwhelming victory, but it was enough. By the authority of this tribunal, Chancellor Vorthake announced, humanity is granted provisional readmission to galactic society for a period of 1 standard year. Their status will be reviewed based on their conduct during this period. As the chamber erupted in discussion, Kira felt tears streaming down her face. It wasn't everything she had hoped for, but it was a chance for her people to prove they belonged among the stars. Pyraxis approached her as the other representatives dispersed. Well done, young ambassador. But you realize this is only the beginning? Now comes the harder task of helping your species live up to the trust that has been placed in them. Kira wiped away her tears and straightened her shoulders. We won't let you down. Humans keep their promises, especially when someone believes in us enough to make them. As news of the tribunal's decision spread across the galaxy, human refugee ships began changing course toward their former homes. Children who had never seen their parents' homeworlds began asking questions about returning to places they had only heard about in stories. But more importantly, the decision had changed something fundamental in the Galactic Council itself. For the first time in generations, they had chosen hope over fear, potential over precedent. The debate over humanity had forced them to question their own assumptions and consider that maybe their way of maintaining peace wasn't the only way. Kira stood at the observation deck of the Eternal Flame, watching as the first human ships began their journey home. She thought about her parents, who had died believing their species was doomed. They would have been proud to know that their daughter had helped prove them wrong. The Forsaken Child had become humanity's ambassador, and the galaxy would never be the same. But that was exactly what the galaxy needed, a little more chaos, a little more hope, and a lot more humans asking, what if we tried something different? The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to write. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was writing stories that nobody expected.